I'm fairly critical of the ANC, the DA, and pretty much every other political party, as you guys well know. I don't view myself as a cheerleader for any of these guys. And when the DA came out with their proposed plan to replace BEE, I was one of the first people to say, but this isn't a plan. It's a framework at best. There's no plan. Like, what are you going to do specifically in order to get this done? Well, it turns out that I am among the few South Africans that actually care about that kind of thing. And most South Africans apparently don't care as much. South Africans just want something different, something that we haven't tried before. You'll remember, as most of us have spoken about this before, we've asked, and I'm sure all of you have asked this at one point or another around the Braai fires or whatever, when are South Africans going to wake up? And specifically, let's be real, when are Black South Africans going to wake up and realize that the ANC's policies don't work? Well, it turns out they've been waking up for a long time. The issue is just when you look on social media, it doesn't look like they've woken up. But when you look at the polling, when you look at the actual companies and people asking ordinary South Africans are not happy with the current direction. And it turns out that after 30 years of race-based laws and ordinary South Africans looking around them and going, well, this clearly isn't working, South Africans are ready to abandon this. Take a listen to Frans Cronje explaining the data.
So Gabriel takes us back to October 2023, and the foundation asks that the government should appoint only the best candidates to jobs, regardless of their race. And 87% of all respondents agreed with that. Amongst Black respondents, it was 84. Amongst ANC respondents, it was also 84. A second question, I'll jump through them a bit for you, is that when the government buys goods or services, it should do so based on the best price and value, regardless of the race of the company supplying these goods. And 85% of South Africans said they agreed with that. Go to 2024, and the questions that Gabriel's now posing are about the coalition government. And he says a future coalition government should make race-based rules stricter so that we properly enforce this BE thing, or this coalition government should abandon the whole idea, get rid of race-based appointments so that all government officials are appointed only on merit. And support for the only on merit option was 74%. Amongst Black voters, it was 68%, and amongst ANC voters, it was 64%. On procurement, the GNU should abandon race-based procurement and, in fact, do exactly what the DA has proposed on Monday. In support of that was 71% of all voters, 64% of Black voters, and 61% of ANC voters. And he goes on into another survey done later in that year, and he asks the same questions again. And on the question of abandoning race-based appointments in the civil service and race-based procurement, again he gets these very overwhelming majorities amongst ANC voters. 73% support abandoning race-based appointments, and 57% supported abandoning race-based stuff. And what has clearly happened.
Now, I found this incredibly interesting. And I love the fact that this is happening because it aligns with a lot of the research that I've done, where I've shown you, for example, the Afrobarometer, where they find that over 76% of Black South Africans want South Africa to move past our racial past. They don't want race to be a thing in our country. Again, social media will give you a very different idea, but you have to remember that people on social media have made their entire personalities race. And so there's no way for them to move to where the rest of the country is, where people just want jobs. They just want to be able to survive without having to constantly go stand in a queue to get a small, teeny little check from the government. Now, there's some of you that might be listening to this as capitalists and saying, wait a second, Stephen, I don't like the fact that the government is still directing it. And yes, even though the DA's plan to replace black with poverty has some merit, and for those of you that might be saying, well, how are you going to redress the past? By replacing black with poverty, you'll actually be able to redress the legacy of apartheid far better. But you don't even need apartheid in this instance in order to see that this is actually not a terrible idea. I am, as a capitalist, a huge fan of the government providing the guardrails. I don't like the government directing the economy, and the government should absolutely not have power to pick winners and losers within an economy. But it is fine for the government to say, look, we need to go in a direction. Let's put up some guardrails to ensure that we go in that direction. So, for example, let's take steel, right? Should the government be protecting ArcelorMittal? Absolutely not. It's a company. It needs to sink or swim. But is it possible for the government to identify that, hold on, China is dumping all of their steel in South Africa below market price, making it impossible for ArcelorMittal to even compete on equal grounds because of just the sheer amount of local factors that is working against them? Yeah. So can the government go in and say, hold on, we're going to place tariffs on these Chinese steel? We're not your dumping grounds? Absolutely. And the government should do that. It should never be to just protect ArcelorMittal, because at the same time, you need legislation that allow for more competition in the long steel industry so that ArcelorMittal isn't the only player. But the government can absolutely protect some of its industry from unfair advantages that may or may not arise. And so I don't mind the government saying, hold on, we have a big problem with poverty and skill transfer in this country. Is there a way for us to set up this BEE legislation in such a way that it actually benefits the poor, that it helps to create skills in poorer neighborhoods, that it maybe moves businesses into poorer neighborhoods where poor people can actually start working themselves out of that poverty? And I think that is a really good thing. In this same interview, Frans Cronje made it clear that even within the bowels of the ANC, they are looking at this proposal, and while publicly they go, BE is here to stay, on the inside, they are looking at what the DA is doing, and they're a little afraid, because the DA has suddenly become the party with a plan that is massively supported by the people of this country. And more importantly, means the ANC, for the first time in really their own history, is no longer the party with the ideas. They're now the party listening to others. And Cyril Ramaphosa has even said they'll be happy to have this conversation in Parliament where it belongs. And according to Frans Cronje, at least within the bowels of the ANC, they understand that BEE has not worked. I think the problem for the ANC is figuring out, how do you replace BEE without imploding your party? Because right now, there's a lot of people that eat at the troughs of South Africa thanks to BEE in large part. And if you just scrap it, that's probably not going to be a good idea. I personally am cautiously optimistic. I still want to see exactly how this implementation is going to work from the DA. I like the plan, as I've said before, on sort of the broad term. I think if we're going to replace BEE with anything, that's probably the best way to go. I don't necessarily think laissez-faire economy will work in the current situation that South Africa is in, because if you just opened the market and allowed people to just do business, you would end up with a few very, very rich billionaires that just sort of, destroy the rest of us, because you have so many millions of people in this country that aren't educated, government's fault, that don't have the skills, government's fault, that doesn't have the economic sort of platform to launch from, government's fault. We have to fix a lot in this country. And a part of that is education. A part of that is skills development. And maybe, just maybe, this new PEE, poverty economic empowerment, can actually do that. At least we hope, right? This is an interesting sort of development. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you think could happen here. If you put aside your criticisms of the government, because yes, those are very real and I share those, but just look at it from the policy position and tell me whether or not you think good idea, bad idea. As always, hit the like if you liked, the dislike if you didn't. I really appreciate you, and it's free, so you really don't lose anything. Massive shout out and thank you to all of the patrons as well as the YouTube channel members for continuing to support this channel. And hopefully, eventually, I'll be able to get researchers and actual investigative journalists on the payroll so that we can actually start investigating a lot of the stories that we now cover on this channel. As always, be good to each other, be kind to each other, question everything. And I'll see all of you in the next one. Peace.